Okay, great. There's no one in the waiting room. Let's go. Welcome to everyone, and welcome and thank you to our speakers for today. And thank you for joining us at this online event where we will dive into equity in AI and how AI can drive cities to become more equitable. My name is Koen van der Kaveye, and at London & Partners, I lead the inward investment team's work across AI, education, and life sciences. And I also co-chair Pride in Partners, which is our LGBTQIA+ employee networking group. We're very excited to have partnered with AI LA to bring our cities closer together, to share best practice and explore opportunities. And we have some fantastic speakers today with deep expertise and knowledge. And as ever, we're keen to make meaningful connections to drive this agenda forward. A very quick note on housekeeping. Could I ask everyone to remain on mute until you have a question, perhaps if you're asked? And can I also ask everyone to hover over their name and company and change it so we know who you are through Zoom. Any questions, please post them in the chat. My colleague James is here, who will be monitoring and answering potential questions or feeding them through. And our speakers will also be having a look at that. And my colleague Joanna is here also on the call, and you will hear from her later. So this meeting is being recorded, and we will share the recording and slides with all attendees afterwards. And so for those of you who don't know us yet, London Partners is a social enterprise with a mission to create economic growth that's resilient, sustainable, and inclusive. And on the business side, we work to attract overseas companies to London and support them with that expansion. And for London-based companies, whether they're founded here or expanded from abroad, we offer programs to grow their business and use the city as a springboard to other international markets. London is a great place for companies to grow and collaborate, and our AI ecosystem here has been growing from strength to strength. The sector is a priority both for the UK and London government, with strategies and funding in place to develop the next generation of talent, build on our deep tech research strengths, for example, through the Alan Turing Institute, and build frameworks around data ethics and open data. And on the private side, there's plenty of funding available from London's angels and VCs. For example, last year, or actually in 2019, over $1.5 billion was invested in AI companies. And the sector's growth is also driven by corporates from finance to marketing, e-commerce to clean tech, all looking to become more competitive by applying AI solutions. And of course, there are also fantastic events such as CognitionX, which bring the London and global community together. We're kicking off today with two keynotes with perspectives from London and LA respectively, after which you'll hear from a panel of public and private sector experts. I hope you enjoy the event. Use the chat to connect with us and each other. And now over to our first speaker, Reema Patel from London's Ada Lovelace Institute.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to get my slides and hopefully share them. Great. So hopefully you can all see my slides.
That works. Thank you.
Right, here we go. Yeah, you managed to get a sneak preview of some of them. Well, I just wanted to say thank you very much for the invite to speak. I'm from the Ada Lovelace Institute. We're based in London, but we do think about technology and social and ethical challenges all over the world. And you're looking at somebody who is a born and bred Londoner, so it's quite rare. I'm a huge fan of London as a city, and I'm really delighted to be invited to talk about this question because I see myself very much as a product of the environment that I grew up in, and also see that there is huge potential for data and AI in particular to help enhance social outcomes and our city. And actually that's one of the reasons for why I've been working for 3 years at the Ada Lovelace Institute. So when I joined, it was a twinkle in the eye. It had not yet been conceived. We're an incredibly young organisation, but the ambition was always to think about how we could make sure that technology, data and AI works for people in society. We're an independent research and deliberative body, And we do a lot of work when we're thinking about some of these questions, although I am trying to wonder why it is I can't move my slides. There we are. We do a lot of work, but we've got kind of 3 areas of focus. One is around being evidence-led, so conducting, supporting and amplifying work that is rigorous, and interdisciplinary, thinking about the impact of data and AI on people and society. Our work is pretty people-centered, so we run a range of participatory initiatives as well, thinking about some of these examples, citizen council, citizen juries, and convene people together with experts to help inform better AI and data policy. And we're also policy and practice facing, so it's all about informing and ensuring that people like yourself are able to take on board some thinking that we're doing and hopefully embed it into your own thinking and your own practice, and it's why I'm here today. So that's enough about us and also enough about me, but hopefully you get a sense of where I'm coming at this from. Great, and next slide. So what I want to begin with today is the idea of the technosocial system, which sounds incredibly academic, but actually it isn't. But it's essentially the idea that the technologies are, they're interweaved with the city, the notion of the city. And the example I like to give is actually that of the bridge. At one point, the bridge was this great innovation, and we saw it as an idea, a principle, something that could be embedded into the city. But now when we actually look at the city, we see that the bridge is increasingly as much a part of the identity of the city as anything else. And here, we've got the classic example of London's Tower Bridge. But when we think about cities, often you think about these pieces of infrastructure and architecture. And in a way, that's what I see as the potential future for AI. When we think about the city, we don't think of AI is abstracted from the city. We think of the city as having AI or data-driven technologies and data-driven systems inherently part of them. And so that's really interesting because it's a tension. It's a tension between seeing the technology as something that we think about in its abstract and the technology as part of the social system that we are trying to create or co-create or design. This is as important as the mayor's vision for infrastructural planning or design more broadly. It is part of the mayor's vision in that respect, and that's a really important point to bear in mind when we're thinking about this question about equity and the role that AI plays in relation to equity. But another concept that we find really useful is that there's actually a range of really complex factors or outcome. I seem to be hearing something in the background, but I'm hoping that's anyway. I'm going to carry on. It doesn't look like anyone else is hearing that, so that's a good thing. The Dalgo-Whitehead rainbow is actually a theory, a way of theorizing what engenders more equitable outcomes or may affect inequality from health inequalities literature. But I actually think this is pretty useful when we're just thinking about equity itself. And the point this rainbow makes is it's complicated. There's a range of different factors that exacerbate or address equitable outcome, and understanding that complexity is key to helping to answer the question that has been set out here. So it's individual lifestyle factors do make a difference, but they interact with our social and our community network. So when we think about the extent to which urban areas may have significant inequalities within them, even within them, perpetuated by social capital, social network, we understand actually the challenges in terms of using and deploying AI and embedding them as a technosocial system in this respect. There's also a whole host of other conditions that affect that, so access to jobs, education, living, working conditions, unemployment, access to basics that we take for granted. But of course, a lot of us will be thinking about housing, healthcare, and public health more broadly in the current context we find ourselves in. And these are all contributing to this question of how do we engender more equitable outcome. And what I like about this rainbow is it's kind of illustrates that there might be dynamic relationship between these, and that equitable outcomes aren't a simple thing to realise, in the sense that equity in one respect may be addressed, but it may change something elsewhere. So what we often describe as a wicked problem. So you might address the problem of, for instance, missing data. You may manage to get representative data sets, for instance, but then you may find that actually, as a result, you're over-profiling or over-targeting a particular group. So you try to tackle one thing in one place and revealed another challenge or another problem somewhere else. And that's the other thing that it would be really good to encourage a discussion about. And I've just been reading this totally separately, you know, to my day job, which is a great book. It's free on Kindle, by the way, Daniel Defoe's Journal of a Plague Year. And it's a journal of what happened during the bubonic plague in London, so the Black Death. And I just really kind of found myself again interrogating this question, which is how do we kind of grasp the implications of the pandemic for, again, the design of the city? So we as Defoe, this wonderful passage from Defoe illustrates, the face of London was now indeed strangely altered. Building, city, Liberty, suburb, Westminster, Southwark. We need to first get our heads around what's actually going to happen in terms of the broader context before we can also get our heads around the role that AI and technology could play in terms of addressing that. So that's a new challenge. Just to summarise, yet again, it's complicated. And so my answer to the question is, I don't think that any technology can, in isolation, enable equitable city, because that's actually the responsible people, strategies and systems. But I do think that there's two areas in which AI can make a start. Firstly, not worsening inequalities. So there's a really broad ranging debate, I think, that many of us will be aware of, around addressing bias, tackling discrimination, understanding the dynamics, what's happening here, how it is that you can have data sets that are unrepresentative or underrepresented, all of these types of questions. But I also think that they can go a step further than that if we articulate that vision for that. I think it can make a start by helping us to identify biases. So where do they exist? You know, there's a really interesting point, which is that bias is human, and if we can develop technology that enable us to identify, articulate where those are, almost act as a check on us, that could be a really interesting role for AI to play. And it can also, in that context, make inequalities more transparent or visible. So really good example is electronic patient record system and data-driven system called Open Safely here in the UK that allowed us to look at over 7 million electronic patient records in order to understand who was being disproportionately affected by the pandemic in the UK. And that initiative revealed, for instance, that people from ethnic minority background and people on low income were disproportionately affected. That's a really good example of a data-driven system, an AI system that just goes that step further, doesn't just help address inequalities, but also allows us to do something about them. And then, I mean, just take that first piece, so not exacerbating inequality. There are some themes we've identified that affect outcomes. So one is around, you know, the missing data problem, poor quality data, lack of data, or indeed poor quality data that's not available in as timely a way as we might like. So, you know, obviously that's been something that we've been thinking about an awful lot in the context of the pandemic. But as I mentioned, on the other hand, the risk of overcorrecting, over-profiling or over-surveilling particular groups. So I'm really interested in the US conversation on this, in particular the work that Virginia Eubanks has done on how over-profiling or over-surveillance might happen in the context of public services and how we might design to ensure that we don't automate inequality. We might say automate or aim to address and create equality. So the underrepresentation of groups, and there's a few other points, which is around lack of impact assessment. So recently we published a report called Explaining the Black Box, which articulates different ways you might impact assess technologies or AI for bias, or a broader set of questions, actually, like who's affected by this that we don't quite understand, and that might be much more contextual in the context of, say, biometrics or data use, or public policy in, I don't know, children's social care. You might have a really different set of questions you might ask about, for instance, the effect it had on healthcare workers or social workers. And then the last big point here to be made is around prototyping, testing, sandboxing. So what are the kind of fail-safe or safer environments to be able to understand where the unintended effects might be, or where the perverse incentives might be. And just on the sort of tackling inequalities front, I just thought I'd give some different examples. I've already mentioned the case study or the example of Open Safely, but then there's a few others which are not necessarily unique to London. And the city mapper data, again, really quickly repurposing that data to understand how people were moving across the city at aggregate level, and to help inform public policy making. I thought that was a really interesting example. On the right-hand side, I've got an example that is particularly important to me, because we're actually using this software. We're using this in terms of our recruitment processes, and we want to develop and adopt the software and use it in order to help us identify and check our own unconscious bias in recruitment. So I think that's potentially, personally, I'm currently piloting it or testing it, but it'll be really interesting to see how that fares. But that's I think a great example where AI can help address some inequalities in decision making. And I just wanted to leave you with this sort of feedback loop that I've been working on for a while, which articulates in a way how we can engender more equitable outcomes from data and AI system. And what it tries to map, or well, I mean, maybe you could tell me whether it does this well at all, is the relationship between the quality of our data on the left-hand side, more representative, inclusive, and proportionate data and governance, and how people feel about that. Because you know, the more confident people feel in a system, the more likely it is that they might share their data, for instance, or contribute their data, or adopt the system and contribute to improving the system. The more likely it is, therefore, actually in turn, that we are to get better outcomes. And the more likely we get, you know, if we get better outcomes, that then actually continues to strengthen people's trust or confidence in that system. So we start to see this virtuous feedback loop, rather than, you know, a vicious cycle where actually the opposite happens, where people feel quite, you know, they don't feel they have that public confidence and trust, which then undermines the mandates in the system and undermines beneficial social outcomes. I do believe I have gone slightly over time, sorry about that. So I'm just going to wrap up on that note. And thank you very much for the invite to speak. And it would be really good if I could hear a little bit more from what you guys have to think and say on this question. Take care. Bye.
Great, thank you, Reema. That was really insightful. Really great kind of points around how AI in itself isn't going to make cities more equitable. People are, but of course we are the ones that choose how to use the technology, what the technology looks like, what data we use, and all of that. So yes, very interesting. And I think we're going to go now over to LA to hear the perspective from LA and continue the conversation there. So we're going over to Todd Terrazas, who leads and founded the AI LA community, for his perspective. Todd, over to you.
Thank you. Can we see my slides and me, I guess?
Yeah.
All right, let's do this. All right, welcome everyone. Great to be here. Yeah, my name is Todd Terrazas, and I'm the founder and executive director of the AI LA community. We're a nonprofit based in Los Angeles, focused on accelerating innovation through education, conversation, and collaboration. And so we host a number of different types of events and push out a lot of different digital content, focusing around topics like this. responsible AI, conversations around sustainability, and healthcare and life sciences. And so it's great to have this conversation today about, does AI enable equitable cities? So right now we're experiencing the fourth industrial revolution. The first industrial revolution, as we know, used water and steam to power mechanized production. The second used electric power to create mass production. And the third used electronics and information technology to automate production. Now with the fourth industrial revolution, it's building on the third industrial revolution, and is characterized by a fusion of technologies that is blurring the lines between the physical, digital, and biological spheres. Unlike the previous industrial revolutions, the fourth is evolving at an exponential rather than linear rate. According to the World Economic Forum, because of the pandemic, the workforce is automating faster than expected, disproportionately impacting millions of low-skilled workers and displacing 85 million jobs in the next 5 years. Automation and a new division of labor between humans and machines will create 97 million new jobs, but communities most at risk from disruption will need support from businesses and governments for reskilling. Technologies like artificial intelligence have been progressing more rapidly because of the exponential increase of computing power and by the mass availability of data. As you all know, artificial intelligence has become ubiquitous in our everyday lives. AI is embedded in most digital products we use every day, from search, social media, virtual assistants like Siri, Google Home, and Cortana, to our Netflix recommendations. And we're already starting to pilot autonomous cars and drones in our cities. So what does it mean for a city to be equitable? And what does AI have to do with it? To understand equity, next slide, please. And the next one. So to understand equity, it's important to distinguish it from equality. Equality implies that each individual should receive the same. In healthcare, this would translate to all individuals paying the same amount for the same health service. However, some groups within a society may have greater needs than others. Equity, though, focuses on eliminating differences between groups when those differences can be addressed. So in healthcare, this would translate into sliding payment scales for the same health services. Now, cities are complex systems. Next slide, please. But stripped to the basics, they consist of diverse communities of people that interact with their environment filled with roads, buildings, and public places across a broad range of settings and contexts. AI has the ability to drastically improve or destroy the welfare of our underserved communities. The pandemic has shown us, next slide, please. The pandemic has shown us just how flawed our health systems are and how digitally divided our underserved communities are. We will need to make sure as we adopt a smart city and AI-first infrastructure that we actively keep all of our citizens in the feedback loop. So we are designing and deploying responsible AI applications that are representative of the diverse populations it serves. Next slide, please. Los Angeles is the second largest city in the United States, and LA County is the third largest metropolitan economy in the world, with a population over 10 million and a GDP of over 700 billion. The diverse multi-ethnic population of LA today distinguishes the city as a cultural hub of the Pacific Rim. People from more than 140 countries speaking 224 different identified languages currently call Los Angeles home. So, does AI enable a more equitable city here in Los Angeles? Absolutely. But in order for our diverse population to trust the intelligent systems we deploy, we will need to develop our AI infrastructure responsibly, ensuring that the ethical and transparent accountable use of the technologies in a manner consistent with user expectations, organizational values, and societal laws and norms. If AI is designed responsibly, then we can guard against the use of biased data or algorithms, ensure that automated decisions are justified and explainable, and help maintain our user trust and individual privacy. But of course, there's challenges. One of the greatest risks with AI is amplifying and reinforcing existing human biases. We've seen, next slide, please. We've seen examples of this in facial recognition technologies unable to detect dark-skinned faces, Amazon's sexist hiring algorithm, which was biased towards women applicants, credit scoring algorithms that discriminate against women, racial biases found in the major healthcare risk algorithm in the United States, which assigned Black patients a lower risk score than white patients, a flawed criminological software used to predict the likeliness of a criminal or reoffending, which was used as a guide when criminals were being sentenced. And also, who cannot forget what we recently exposed to, but recommendation systems that promote violent content and training algorithms that amplify fake news. But there is hope that Los Angeles can learn from others' mistakes. Our Mayor Garcetti has said in the past that Los Angeles is a platform for experimentation. It's a place where you can try different things out, So Los Angeles has a very diverse population. We have 4 million residents in the city speaking 224 different languages. Next slide, please. Most common being English and Spanish. The city can't possibly employ enough staff that can communicate in so many languages, but AI has the ability to help translate websites and digital documents faster than any human can, so we can serve a greater number of people. During the pandemic, city workers had to work from home, just like all the rest of us. But even though the city was physically closed, next slide, please, physically closed, in order to manage the high frequency of inbound calls, they deployed a chatbot named Chip, which was a City Hall internet personality to help field questions to the more than 97,000 businesses they serve. LA is slowly also rolling out its digital citizenship program called the Angelino account. Your Angelino account is your one digital key to unlock the many doors at LA City Hall, at LA City Hall. So you can pay your utility. The dream is that you can pay your utility bills, check out a book at the public library, pay a parking meter, or buy tickets to the Greek Theater for a concert, all with the same login. And by developing this type of program, it allows the city to carefully, through an opt-in procedure, collect data from its constituents to help better serve their interests. And so LA is also testing smart lighting, smart parking meters, camera-equipped trash pickup trucks to help monitor the streets for potholes, overgrown trees, and other anomalies that may need attention. And so by mixing weather data, traffic data, and analytics derived from the cameras on these trucks, the city can start developing predictive maintenance models so that they know when there is likely to be a pothole on a given street, so a service ticket can be automatically issued. This can definitely help develop a more equitable city where more services are being attended to. And then also, LA is now home to a new LA Rams NFL stadium, which is the SoFi Stadium, and it's actually the first stadium to ever have a digital twin. And so digital twins are pretty important in this conversation around smart cities and the fourth industrial revolution. So digital twins were first developed by NASA for space exploration. Next slide, please. They are a cutting edge technology that converts all quantifiable aspects of physical buildings into living, learning, and evolving virtual replicas. It is the most intuitive way to store, organize, and access the vast amount of data generated by these complex, smart environments, allowing urban planners the ability to optimize every aspect of their environment and run simulations. So digital twins can actually help support civic engagement from the safety of their homes on new project developments in their local communities. Keeping citizens informed and engaged every step of the way in this digital transformation is crucial in the success of developing an equitable city enabled by AI, because we don't want to leave anyone out. So in 2028, coming up, the Summer Olympics are going to be hosted in Los Angeles, and we're busy prepping our city for the increase in tourism during that time. So we see opportunities for collaboration with our friends in London for a number of reasons, because first off, they hosted the Summer Olympics in 2012, so they definitely can help share best practices and help crowdsource solutions to common problems that we all face in our given cities. But in the end, it all comes down to the people and values. We need to shape a future that works for all of us by putting people first and empowering them. And so I hope you'll join us. And I'm looking forward to the panel discussion following this. So thank you so much for your time, and look forward to the panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Todd. Yes, AI has the potential to improve or destroy the welfare of citizens. So we're very lucky now we have Tabitha Goldstaub with us, founder of CognitionX and chair of the UK AI Council. She's going to be moderating a session with experts and leaders from both cities, and hopefully we'll find out how we can make sure that we improve the citizens' welfare. And Tabitha, over to you.
Hello, good morning and good afternoon to our different viewers. I can't see myself, but I imagine you can see me and hear me. Just gonna nod would be good. Okay, good. So I imagine I'm now working. You can see London behind me. Potentially one day I'll have LA behind me again. So Today, as has just been beautifully outlined, we're going to dig into what the challenges and the opportunities are about putting AI into cities and making sure it's done equitably. We have some amazing speakers to help us do that. Karim Beguir, from the co-founder and CEO of Instadeep. We've got Bistra, Dilkina, the co-director of USC Center for AI and Society. Joyce, Edison, the City of LA. Edith, Szendrodi, the program director at Microsoft for Startups UK, and Gadney, the founder and CEO of Charisma.ai. And what I would like to do is start by calling on Joyce to talk a little bit about what they're doing in the City of LA. I think we'll all be fascinated to hear what's actually happening on the ground, and then we'll come to the panelists and ask them about their thoughts on the opportunities that they see in putting AI into cities and into the products we all use. And then, of course, we'll come back around and talk about the challenges. And then finally, we'll look at what's coming around the corner, where government can get involved, and ultimately, hopefully, leave you with some advice for how London and LA can collaborate. What's very important to me is that all of you listening, there's a lot of participants on the line, can ask your questions. So I will do my very best to weave those in along the half an hour that we have, if you ask them in the chat window. But first, let's quickly come to Joyce.
Good morning, everybody. I've been asked to speak on what's happening right now in the city of Los Angeles as far as AI and technology. Todd gave you a really good rundown of a lot of the major projects that we have going involving technology and AI. The biggest thing that we have been challenged with by our mayor, Eric Garcetti, is to perform technology for a purpose, not just technology's sake. And that honestly is very refreshing, because many of you who are in the tech arena know that it's very easy to kind of get involved with technology and kind of go down the rabbit hole because it's very cool. But because we're government, because we're utilizing the public fund, we have to be very careful with how we use that and make sure that we use it wisely. We really try to be cutting edge, not bleeding edge, when we do our technology. So when we venture off into something that is relatively new for a government to get into, we will start out doing a limited proof of concept, move that into a limited pilot, in an area of the city that is representative of some of our biggest challenges. We use the city as a living lab in that case, and we do that because if we found that if we can do that on the ground in the city, then we can pretty much do that anywhere. And we work with the vendors in order to build out the product so that if for some reason it does not work to scale for Los Angeles, it could work very well for somebody else, because we want to promote business in Los Angeles. We want LA to be Silicon Beach, which is what Mayor Garcetti had sort of deemed Los Angeles and the Los Angeles area. Our goal for technology and AI is tech for a purpose, to inform, include, and to serve. Todd mentioned CHIP. CHIP stands for the City Hall Internet Personality, and he is our city concierge. He is our city representative. He is there 24/7, 365 when the city cannot be, when humans cannot be. He is also there to handle most frequent questions, because city people can't do that, and city staff are human. So answering the same question over and over and over again a day, at the end of the day, could provide not as great a customer experience as it did at 8 o'clock in the morning. So CHIP helps city staff take that load off and do the things that only city staff can do. Again, using our resources in the best possible way. One of the realizations that we came to when we put out CHIP, and honestly, he was put out there to help resolve staffing issues. We launched CHIP at, I think, on a Thursday afternoon at 3 o'clock, and we went back and checked his usage at 8 o'clock in the morning the next day, and he was launched with absolutely no fanfare. He just showed up on our Business Assisted virtual network. We noticed that he had gotten over 800 hits over the night, and most of the hits came at 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning.
Amazing.
We thought that was very odd. So we started thinking about it. And what we came to the conclusion is, if you are a small business, you're busy during the day. So when you're looking for your next gig, it's going to be in the middle of the night.
Right.
And that's why they're coming to our site at that point to look for new job opportunities. What also came to the conclusion of is the city has a number of FAQs. And that is what, at this point, is the mainstay that feeds Chip as far as when he interacts with you. Government people speak a government language. It's just kind of the way it is. And so government people are the ones that wrote the FAQs. What we came to find out very, very quickly is when we looked at the analytics on Chip, people were asking the same question over and over again. And Chip was finding the answers and providing it to them, but they weren't understanding.
Yeah.
So we needed to work on making our FAQs more relevant to the public.
Thank you, Joyce. What a good example of an opportunity that actually worked. I like the concept of focusing on serving the public. Let's come to Bistra. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are around the opportunity about where AI can get, can serve the public.
Thanks, Tabitha. Yeah, so at the USC Center for AI and Society, basically our goal is to try to foster academic research to leverage AI to tackle the most difficult societal problems. The idea is to, really rally academics, faculty, students to think about how they can use their, mental cycles, research cycles to try to leverage, the amazing new techniques we are developing for the problems that really matter the most to society today. And so our goal is to basically create a genuine partnership between academics from computer science and social work, together with community partners and domain experts, to try to understand what the pressing issues are, what is the data, what are the questions that need to be answered, and develop techniques that can help. So just to give you one example, is in LA, homelessness is one of the very big grand challenges, right? We have 66,000 people experiencing homelessness in LA County. And, the support services like the LA Homeless Services Authority have in place programs and so on to help this disadvantaged population, like by providing temporary housing. And so in the center, for example, we are trying to leverage AI to help them redesign some of the prioritization system that they have in place when they serve this community. And the idea is that we can actually leverage AI in a very careful way, obviously, to try to figure out how we can actually make refinements to the system to advance equity while improving system flow and increasing confidence in the system. The idea is to basically try to use as much as the historic data as possible to understand what works well and what not to increase system flow, but at the same time, actually in this new proposed design system to enforce equity constraints, right? So that the benefits of these services are as well distributed, as equitably distributed between subpopulations in the people that need homelessness. That's one example.
That's a good example.
And another example is, for example, just helping the city. AI can really help, as was already mentioned by multiple people. AI can really help cities deploy the limited resources that they have to create the benefits that they want for their constituents, right? And so that's where, again, data-driven decision-making with AI algorithms can help sift through the millions of possibilities that one can, for example, improve our roads or redesign our water delivery system, etc. and in a way that actually can take these limited resources and maximize the benefits, while also obviously taking into account who gets served and who doesn't. In a project that the center has with the city, we are working with the LA Department of Water and Power to use AI techniques to help them decide which parts of the water pipe system will be upgraded to stronger materials that resist earthquake, in order to make sure that when a disaster like that hits, critical customers like hospitals and evacuation centers actually have water, right? And so, for example, this is a planning challenge that is just tremendous, right? And there's, you know, thousands of pipes in our large metro area. And so without actually the proper tools to help make those design decisions, there could be waste of resources or inefficiency or not reaching certain very critical parts of.
Thank you.
Yep.
Got some good advice there. We're going to come to Karim next and hear a little bit about what opportunities Karim feels. Then we're going to go to Guy and then Edith. So 2 minutes each. Karim.
Thank you, Tabitha. So first, it's a pleasure to be here. And I want to mention that Instadeep was actually launched in London. And today we're in one of the 100 most promising startups, AI startups in the world, thanks to the thriving London ecosystem. So this is exactly, this is one example of what London can do, and likewise. And for me, like the key thing when you look at a city is that a city is really a complex system, and that means that, you know, the first imperative is improving efficiency. When you look at, for example, like complex systems, if you look at the example of SpaceX, look at the incredible cost savings and efficiencies that a very motivated engineering team based on data can achieve. And likewise, a city is really a complex system where basic services, like was just mentioned right now about like water delivery, or optimizing transportation to reduce the number of cars in the street while increasing occupancy, like if you think about a fleet of taxis, all those are complex decision-making problems. And until now, our approach has really been to sort of have, you know, the leadership of the city make high-level decision based a bit on gut feeling, a bit on experience. So in many ways, it's the situation for the games of like chess and Go before the incredible breakthroughs that DeepMind popularized with AlphaGo, AlphaZero. And the point I'm making here is there are non-controversial efficiency gains that can be achieved by having AI not just extract more relevant data, but so process that data at city scale. When you think about, for example, how you design tube lines or road traffic management systems, those are not obvious decisions. And this is where I believe AI can help tremendously. And I believe that in the future, we'll see a significant difference between cities that efficiently use AI while also keeping an eye on the nefarious uses of AI and others. And in many ways, we are at the beginning of this revolution, and it takes a little bit of everybody to contribute to make this happen. But there are big opportunities for a city like London or LA.
Yeah, I totally agree. And Guy, I think you have some of those specific case study, don't you?
Yeah, so I think, you know, there's the interesting question of why would someone from the creative industries be on this panel? And I think, you know, the simple answer for us is that I think as we move to cities that have more integrated technologies, so we're seeing more dynamic and fluid and flexible cities sort of enabled, and that the importance of human-centered technology becomes more important. We found out very early on as we were building our sort of AI data sets in 2016 that data sets were sort of not really fit for purpose when you were looking at diverse audiences. So we wrote a paper which we published in 2018 around with the Refig organization in Canada around unconscious bias in AI data sets. And we've used that really to build up our platform, you know, which is aimed at the media industry. Right. And as we've gone on that journey, especially as we've seen the rise of GPT-2 and GPT-3 as automatic content generation, we've seen the good and the bad that brings through. So for us, you know, it's really quite simple, which is that we build scenario simulations of human experiences, and whether that's, you know, like it might be a scenario where you're talking to Harry Potter, or you're in a movie, or that you're talking to someone like Chip in LA, you know, noticing that Joyce referred to Chip as a concierge, and as he, you know, we refer to these things as people, and we need to be very mindful of what that does to us as humans. And also that in the data that we pull out of it, we must recognize that it's not just about numbers, but it's about the depth of insight that we get for numbers. Numbers are great statistics, but they're not insights. And we've found, again, leading on from what Bistra was saying about homelessness, we do a lot of work with that, with a project I work on in Oxford, which suffers from homelessness. And we found that actually the best way to report on that is through stories, because that's how you get the depth of insights. And it's not about moving one person off the streets and into housing. It's what the story is that has. So our focus very much is on if you're building cities and you're developing cities, it's not just about physical buildings. Now it's about much more fluid, dynamic flow that is much more human focused, and we need to build that into more conversational systems that are more human-like.
Yeah, it's a good idea. It goes back to Joyce's point about using the living labs and Chip. I could see Chip helping you guys helping Chip. And Edith, last but very much not least, we'd love to hear about the work you're doing at Microsoft on this topic.
Yes, absolutely. So I could go into a lot of great stories and a lot of kind of important conversations around this, but the rest of the panel has really kind of covered a lot of the things that I would have said as well. So just a very quick summary of what we're doing. Obviously in London and in UK, the tech ecosystem in general is pretty brilliant. And what we have seen with Microsoft and with one of our partners, the Social Tech Trust, is that it's very important that the for good, the social impact companies are getting their kind of like time to shine as well. So we have been running a cohort, a 4-month cohort every year. Our third year is just starting in March, which was called AI for Good. And now it's called AI for Social Impact, for very much the economic and equal social recovery from COVID that we will be focusing on. We have multiple incredible stories, and you know, as it is with all of the social impact, they are relevant to cities and to equity. But I thought that maybe one of the best example I could bring up is a company called Hello Lamppost. They have been in our previous cohort, so the 2020 cohort. They're basically using AI technology to bring cities and their citizens closer together. They increase the engagement and the participation in local decision making. They give a platform to the public to really have an input and an insight, because it can be shared with the organization anonymously, and it will help the cities to enable better informed decision making, really. That makes sense. Yeah, and it is just, you know, it's just an incredible thing. You go to the park, there's a statue. Why is the statue there? Who's the statue there? What else kind of could be there? And, you know, it seems like a small thing, but when we think about the importance of cities, especially now when we are not allowed to travel, when our circumstances are kind of a lot more closed in, having that input and having that effect on the decision making is something that is super important.
It's really important. Community and I think now, I mean, we've all been so optimistic. It would be remiss of us not to talk about some of the challenges and the real risks of getting this wrong. Joyce, I'd love to hear about how you're tackling things like facial recognition bias and other challenges in the city of Los Angeles. We've got probably about a minute, so I'm going to not do it all justice, but I'd love quick answers.
Facial recognition bias is a big thing in Los Angeles. Our police department, of course, is always in the news about the use of technology and their interaction with our minority communities. We are being very careful about that. Our police commission just passed the ability for LAPD to pilot such an option. One of the things that Todd mentioned was the Angelino account. It is a public IDM system, and it does have a user profile attached to it. We are being very, very conservative in the type of information that we're asking people to share with us. We are very aware that people are very comfortable sharing with Google and Facebook and Twitter and all of the social media. But when it comes to government, there becomes a concern. So we are being very cautious. We are going very slow. Everything is very optional. We are only using that data to do data analysis to improve our programs and our services, to make sure that we're really hitting the things that our public needs. But again, it's a matter of building the trust, making sure that we don't have any data breaches, so that we are not putting our public at risk. Those are all things that have to underpin everything that we do with technology. It's responsible technology.
Yeah, and Bistra, when you're doing the research into this, what are the checks and balances you have to make sure that you're not exasperating biases?
Yeah, that's really important, I guess, both for academia and industry, right? So there's several ways that biases can creep in. One of the ones that I guess everybody already is aware is data, right? The data that we use is already representative of the systems that we have in place, of the possible inequalities of how this data is collected. And so we are always on the lookout and very critical about how some of these data issues might creep into projects that we do. The other big challenge is the AI will do what, like, it's basically the designers have the power to direct it, right? And so that's something that was also mentioned before. In a sense, the responsible AI means responsible designers of AI, right? And so how do we incorporate in the AI tools that we try to develop representative objectives, diverse stakeholder engagement in defining what are we maximizing, right? And so that's another thing that we are actually working on, and is how can we create ways to elicit the preferences and the objective from a diverse pool of stakeholders, such that we guide the goal of the AI tools that we develop to be towards metrics that are themselves equitable and representative, and transparent.
Makes sense. And Edith, how do you pick and choose when you're looking at startups? How do you make sure that you're only working with companies that are responsible, trustworthy, and so on?
Well, there's a lot of due diligence there for sure when we're trying to implement it. Basically, in the previous 2 years, especially, the companies we were selecting for this program were relatively small and they were just starting out. And what has happened that the whole AI technology side was driven by Microsoft. And our very first session that was compulsory for absolutely everyone in the cohort was the responsible AI session, which was exactly as Bistra has been mentioning, that using the principles, putting them into practice, and using the right tools that drives all of Microsoft's approach as well to responsible AI, and with social tech trust input for the social impact, it was something that was built into both the curriculum and obviously hopefully to their whole kind of approach and designed in the company.
It's important. Okay, then we're going to get some final words from Guy and Karim. But what I want to ask you is, how do you see your organizations being able to help collaborate between London and LA? Karim, let's come to you first. I'd love to get your thoughts on sort of how do we bring these two cities closer together? As you said, you've benefited so much from the ecosystem in London, but now we're all virtual. Is there a way, how do you see us all coming together?
I think there are projects which can be of common interest. To give you an example, we at Instadeep, we've worked on ride-sharing systems for taxi fleets. This is something that could benefit both cities because the goal is to have less cars on the road and more people reaching destination on time. Designing urban systems such as trains or tubes is another one. So I think, those are important, significant projects that take time, and I could see a clear case of collaboration possible between forward-looking cities such as London and LA to collaborate and sort of have joint programs, because these are things that every city is going to need. And, the beauty of AI is that it scales very well. So there might be economies of scale out there.
Totally. Good. And Guy, maybe we could have a virtual creative, well, what could we be doing with LA more?
I think we can integrate more. I mean, we have a president of our company in LA, so we're there. We're partnering with the Department of International Trade. London and Partners is being fantastic as well. So I think it's all about bringing this to life in ways that people understand. I do think the ethics, and interesting. We work with Digital Catapult in London as part of their machine intelligence program. We've just gone through their ethics review process, which I really respected. I thought it was really good. I have a personal view that I don't think tech companies can run ethics within a tech company, because you're putting the jury into the prison, to give a sort of negative analogy. If the ethics of AI is important to a city, then it's the city that needs to run that ethics, not the company that's doing it. So I think we need to be very, very sensible about the decisions we make. And as I said before, I think to have a practical human focus on this is vital, which is why we do what we do.
Yeah, totally. I think that's a good moment for us to end on. The human focus. That was definitely a thread all the way from Reema's through to Todd's and the other panelists. Thank you very much, everybody. What a wonderful session. I think I'm going to hand back to Joanna and leave you all. But thank you very much, everybody. Hope you have a lovely day for those in LA and a lovely evening for those in London.
Thank you so much, Tabitha. Thank you for moderating such an engaging panel discussion. And of course, thank you to our panelists, Karim, Bistra, Edith, Guy, and Joyce. And thank you again to Reema and Todd. Hope you're still here for all your insight and expertise on the matter that has brought us all here today. Really everything that was said on the quality of data sets, the responsibility that comes with AI, and seeing what both London and LA are working towards across these different sectors with human-focused AI has resonated deeply. For everyone who doesn't know me, my name is Joanna Hong. I'm the Business Development Executive with London and Partners based in Los Angeles. I work alongside my colleague, James Cummings, who leads our office and region here. And we truly hope you've all been able to enjoy this session on equity and AI, and really how AI can enable cities to become more equitable. As my colleague Karim mentioned at the beginning of the hour, we're thrilled to have partnered with AILA to bring our communities closer together in addressing such pertinent global issues today. And at London and Partners, we are London's international trade, investment, and promotion agency committed to create economic growth that's resilient, sustainable, and inclusive. So from our LA office, where we're at right now, we help companies in the Southwest US region truly understand the opportunity in London and to ultimately expand their global network and thrive in the capital through our diverse community. And as an organization, we have 5 other offices in North America also, in San Francisco, Chicago, New York, and Toronto, along with other overseas offices in France, Germany, India, and China. So please do get in touch with myself, Kun, or James after today's session to connect, and be sure to, of course, follow us on Twitter for all things London. And we really look forward to continuing the conversation on further strengthening our AI ecosystems and working together with you. So thank you again, truly, everyone, for taking the time, and we hope to stay in touch. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.